That's neat. So what was your bedroom like, Mom?
Oh my goodness. I slept, when we were kids, we slept. See, our house was not very big. It was just an older home. And it had quite a long porch on one side. And that eventually became my bedroom when I was 16 or so years old. But at Grandpa Hoyt's, I always had a bedroom of my own up there. But at home, I didn't. And Dan and I said, so some of the things, well, we slept in would be the living room. Only it was, I think it was the living room, I guess. I can't remember whether it was the all living room or if it was part of the kitchen still or whatever, but we had a bed out there. And I remember Dad used to go with the Jew, they used to call him. He was a cattle buyer. And Dad went with him.
Sammy Klein was his name.
Yeah. And Dad
traveled with him. I don't know if he related to Ralph or not. But
my gosh. But anyway, Dad traveled with him, and he come home one night. He'd been gone for a couple of 3 days, and when he come home, he had brought Dan and I a present. And the next morning when we got up, here were these dolls, and they were the first dolls that had their eyes opened and all that sort of stuff. And he just had two of them laying there, one for each one of us. And I mean, Dan was probably 5, and I was probably 7 or whatever. And then that year for Christmas, Mom took those grape baskets we get the grapes in. Used to be rolled ones with the handle. She had taken one of them and she had made a baby buggy for those dolls for Dan and I. And they're in one of my pictures somewhere. There's us with that. But my mother was quite the one. If she needed cupboards, it was her that built her cupboards. Because Dad was not handy that way at all. But it was nothing to come home and Mother, she was in a building project.
I just can't imagine Grandma that way because she was so petite and proper all the time.
She always was, and I always laughed because she was so shy. She was so shy. She was never, and whereas Dad was really outgoing and, Mother was not. And, but you were saying you were going to ask me a question about her when she went to school. She was, her dad died when she was 9, and I think she was about 8 years old or so, and they had a knitting contest at school, and of course my grandmother was a wonderful knitter, so all of us kids were raised knowing how to knit, and Mother had knit something and took it to school, and she won the prize. Well, they got up there and they kept asking for this Edith House to come up, and she just sat there. Finally, her teacher went up to the principal and said, I think if you ask for Dixie, she'll come. She was never called anything but Dixie, but her real name was Edith Florence May House, and but apparently when she was born, her mother was really, really sick, and she couldn't hold her or anything. And so she'd have them just lay her on the bed, and she'd kind of shake the bed, and she'd say, dick-a-dick-dicks, and it just stuck. So she was never, I never even knew her name was anything but Dixie till we used to get our ration cards during the war, and I was 10. And I see this here Edith Florence May Hoyt, I couldn't figure out what in the heck. And then I found out that's Mother's name.
What about you, Dad? What was your room like?
Well, my room, to start with, was, there was 2 bedrooms in the house, and a kitchen front room combined, and a coal shed. And so us boys that were home slept in that one room. And in those days, like I mentioned, all you had was the shiplap on the outside and this beaver board, they called it, on the inside, no insulation, and the old glass single pane windows. And in the wintertime, sometimes you'd wake up in the morning, there was a heater in there. This snow would blow across from through a crack in that window, and it'd be that deep at the wall, right out to nothing, 10 feet away from the window. And that's what you got up on. Never had anything, excuse me, but a linoleum on the floors. And then when we built the new house, well, the whole upstairs was one big room. And so we had, well, it was Vern and Glenn and Lloyd and Melvin and myself and Ray upstairs. And Marie slept downstairs in the little room, and then she slept with, when we had Grandma or Grandpa come, Grandpa Albus and Grandma Berezay come and stay, then she slept either on the Chesterfield or something like that. But we didn't have, well, we had mattresses, them old cheap cotton ones that didn't have any springs in or anything like that. And most of the coverings in those days were quilts, homemade quilts that was tied or whatever. And then we started getting, the folks started getting some Hudson Bay blankets for themselves. And then pretty soon, a year or two later, when when you washed them, you know, if you didn't hang them out to dry, they'd kind of get smaller.
They'd shrink.
And so then them would pass on to us, and they'd get new ones, see, and so.
And when we got married, Dad Berezay used to make sure all of us got a Hudson Bay blanket.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But when we got married, Grandma and Grandpa Berezay gave us our bedroom set, and my folks gives us our stove.
Coal and wood stove.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And that coal and wood stove at that time, he bought it at Spencer's Hardware. It cost $167.
Yeah, and that bedroom set.
And the bedroom suite that folks bought for us cost, I think, about $185. That was the bed, a dresser, and then the chest of drawers.
Yeah,
yeah, with a mirror on it. And so that's what we had for furniture. And then we had one of these Winnipeg couches, they called them, that had a mattress on about that thick. You could fold up and make a double bed out of it. And so I made a front room chair, and outside of that, and we borrowed the table that your mother's got back now. And we bought 4 chairs for $1.75 each, unfinished, from Spencer's Hardware.
For your first house?
This was our first house. It's the ones that had where the spokes come up the back, and there was a kind of a little thing on the back. It was
I
only,
call them fiddle back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you guys have to, all of you boys have to sleep together in one bed?
No, there was 2 boys to a bed.
But
And
when
so
you were
Who'd
younger,
who'd you have to sleep with?
Melvin.
Did he kick?
Melvin was a problem. Melvin had a terrible temper when he was a kid. And he'd just go like that, you know, and his fingers would go out. And when he did that, people moved. But they teased him too, see. And I always just low profile. I didn't want any problem with him at all. Because one time out in the corral, and the same thing, see, when I milked cows, I milked them with my thumb under like this. And the boys, they all milked them like this. They put they put the thumb around, but they put their nails into the side of the tip, you see. And the cows would kick them, whereas I could sit down. But if they'd kick, Melvin would get up and kind of work them over with the stool, and some of the other guys did too. But, you know, but this one time, Mert Lowry was there, a cousin, and they was teasing Melvin. And when the pitchforks, we always had 3-tine bundle forks for pitching the bundles with. And when the handle got broke, then it'd get sawed off, and that was our forks, because we had to feed hay and stuff. And old Mert was teasing him, and he grabbed that fork up like that and started swinging it around his head. And old Mert and Boyd went around the stack, and he let it go, and it stuck in that stack just like that, right where he'd been standing 3 seconds before. And but he finally
outgrew it.
He finally outgrew it. He threw one at Boyd one time in the corral too, and it come sailing through the air, and the tines hit him right across the face like that. And so Vern started working him over. And so Mom come out and she says, "You leave him alone." And so Vern hollered right back to her to tell her what he'd done. And so there's a piece of rope by the gate. So she picks up this rope and she comes out and I can see it yet. She grabbed him by the nape of the neck. He was about probably 12 or 13.
Uncle Melvin?
Yeah, Uncle Melvin, and started taking him to the house, and she was hitting him. Well, every time she'd go to hit him, he'd go down like this and pull her so that she wasn't hitting anything but the ground. Never
like
did hit him.
Grandpa Berezay.
Just like Grandpa Berezay tells the story. But one time I got licking because of him, and how it started is we had the thunder mugs, you know, back in those days, and we had to empty them. That was our nighttime
Pea pot, basically.
the pot, yeah. And so we went out there and you dump it away where it goes, and then you rinse it out and you turn it upside down. Well, it's sitting there to drain, and Melvin gets the idea it'd really be nice to throw rocks at it. And every time he'd throw a rock at it and that enamel would fly off at it, he just thought that was wonderful. You know, he was getting a kick out of it, and I told him to quit. And anyway, it ended up that he had to work quite a bit to pay off that because he had to buy a new pot. And they were probably about $2.75 then, you know. But that's a lot of money.
So why did you get a spanking?
Well, the time was, he used to drive, we had these little cars out of wood and whatever, and so I'd make the roads for him. And so he'd just going and he was ripping the roads up, and I told him, and I was down there trying to fix it, I said, if you don't quit doing that, Melvin, I'm not going to fix any more roads for you. He reached down and got a handful of that dirt and throwed it up right up in my face and filled my eyes, and I stood up and just started screaming. And my mother come out and give me a licking for screaming. But I couldn't see anything. You know, anything in my eyes all my life has been really, and right here. A kid punched me in the belly one time, and I was sick for 3 or 4 days. I just had a tender stomach and, you know, stuff like that. But no, it was, but we lived in, you know, but then when company came, I can remember that we would sleep 6 kids in the bed. We'd go crossways, and so you'd lay this way, the next person's head was down by your feet, and they'd rotate them, girls or boys, whatever it was, that's the way, and it'd fill the bed. 6 kids would fill that bed, and you'd have your heads out on each side instead of out at the ends. That when, you know, when company come and there was a snowstorm or something, or if company come to stay, that's the way you slept. Because there was no other bed. Nobody slept on the floor.
Did you get mice in the house, Mom?
Mm-hmm.
And we had straw ticks back in those days. In other words, you take like this burlap that you made your things out of, them sacks, and you fill it up with clean straw. And then you fluff it all out, and then they put a cover over that so the stuff didn't come through it. But that was the mattress.
That'd probably be comfortable.
It is
A
comfortable.
lot better than the hard old floor.
What about, when did you first start entertaining Dad?
Well, when Grandpa Alvison used to come when I was about 3 years old, maybe 3 or 4, my dad was a step dancer. And so Vern would play the harmonica, and Grandpa would play the violin, and Turkey in the Straw was, and Dad had step dance, so you know how kids, and so I started step dancing, and I got to be really good at it. So anytime that was the first thing, when company'd come, I had to step dance when they were there, and he'd play. And so anyway, then when I got, and in the early days, when Bert Plevin and Eileen and them was around the country, he worked for my dad, they had a radio, and they'd get up there in the corner, and then you'd hear the voice. But by the time that this happened, when I was about 7 or 8, we had a real radio by then. And in those days, you had to pay a license to have a radio in your house, $3.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I started hearing Amos and Andy and Kate Smith and all this stuff, and so I started impersonating when I was about 7.
So what would you do? You'd just say at supper?
Well, one of your first ones was Carmen Miranda.
Oh, yeah. I used to put on a dress, you know, and wrap a turban around. She was a little short. Gimme, 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 gimme. And I'd do it in this woman's voice, you know, and do all this dancing stuff, you see. And Dad, he'd just sit there and hee-haw. But they didn't make me do that in front of people to start with, you know. And then I got to being able to, and I could make these animal sounds, you know, all the time, like cows and pigs and all this and that.
Well, and you started auctioning pretty early.
And so I was about, I guess 8 or 9, and we'd go over to Whiskey Gap. There used to be an auction sale there every Saturday during the summer and through the fall run at Jack Newby. All right, folks, look at this cow coming in here. Give me $20, $20. And there you go. And then he just had a nice, clear voice like that, see? And I'd go home. After we'd sit there for 2 or 3 hours, I'd go home, and I didn't do anything in front of anybody. I'd go out in the barn and, all right, on this nice pig here. Look at this sow pig here. Give me $10.
So you were auctioning.
But my dad, one time, they always used to butcher. And Uncle August had come over, Uncle August Brunette, and when they got done butchering, he'd have more hair left on it than what that a printer had to start with. So one morning, and isn't it funny how coincidence happened? My mother had the tub and the boiler on the stove. It was wash day. And somebody come in and said, Dad, that sow's got her head caught in the stanchion, see? And just like I say about a pig, she'd put her head in and was eating the grain that the cow'd eat, and then when she pulled back, it come against her jaws. So she just laid down, and there she was. So my dad went out there, and it was just a young sow. She only weighed probably 250 pounds. He grabbed her by the hind legs to give her a twist like this to flip her out of there, and broke her neck. So there she was flopping. He run to the house and got the knife and stuck her, just like he'd seen August do it. They went ahead and finished getting the water boiling, put it in a barrel, and he done such a much better job than Uncle August had done, so he butchered his own stuff from then on. And they'd have like 2 sawhorses with some planks on it, with the barrel at an angle, and they'd drop the pig in head first, and they'd let it sit like, and then they'd pull it up, and then they'd put it down in again, and then when they'd pull it up about the 3rd time, and they'd go like this, and the hair would come off, so they'd turn it around, put it on the snout, and lower the back end in the same way, but while in between times, other people were scraping the front part of it off, like on the legs and this. So that's how we got to started butchering pigs when I was a kid.
So that's what made you such a good butcher.
Well,
Seeing all that.
Well, I've learned most of the things that I know by watching other people.
So, Mom, did you have a hobby when you were a kid?
Riding horses.
You used to help Grandpa more than you ever helped Grandma in the house, didn't you? Like,
Oh, yeah. Well, Dad, I mean, I was Dad's boy. And that being that I was the oldest, because there was a lot of things Dan couldn't do, because Dan was really small. And so I just, I've always milked cows and always chased the horses. When I was growing up, we had about 38 head of horses.
wow.
And I got home one night from school and the horses were gone. So I had to go find them. They were down in the Lishman place. And it was dark coming home. And Peanuts knew where he was going, but I needed to bring all the others with me, you know. So, and I was never so glad in my life as to finally see the light in the kitchen at home. And I was past the house, you know. I had to I was quite a bit past it before I could see the light. But once I did, then I was, you know, and by then the horses knew where they were going too, so they just went. But no, we always milked cows, and I've always laughed. Dad was really protective. He never, you know, we weren't supposed to be out there when the calves were being born or the colts or anything. You know, he really didn't want us to be there. And one night, him and I were in the barn milking. I think we were milking about 4 cows at that time, and the old sow pig laid down, and she had her pigs right there by me. I'd never seen anything like that before, you know. Dad was kind of embarrassed about it, but you had to learn. And, but I always did, and I milked cows right up till the time I was married. Well, like that summer, I was off. I was down the Milk River. I worked down there that summer, so I didn't have to milk cows. I was milked.
What was your, how old were you when you went to your first dance?
12.
12 years old.
Well, we used to go right from the time we were little.
Like family dance.
As a family, yeah.
Every dance was a family dance.
Yeah.
And they used to have like at that time, Mr. Gilbert played. Was it Mr. Gilbert who played?
I think so.
And Mom's stepdad was a musician, and he played dances. But then as I was growing up, my Uncle Bill, my Aunt Dolly, my Mom's sister and Dad's brother, and Earl Jensen was the orchestra. And Earl Jensen played the violin, Aunt Dolly played the piano, and Bill played the drums. And that, all my grown-up life was pretty well. And then when we went to Galvanese, or Len's, a lot of times, some of the Jones guys were in the music. But as I was growing up, as I was saying, and we went to dances from the time that, I can't remember when we didn't go. And they used to have the bench. They'd have the benches, and you'd see all these babies sleeping along the benches. And the old, you know, the
Bigger
music
kids,
was
they'd
loud.
be against the wall underneath or behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you went as a family all the time, you know?
Yeah, and you go in a sleigh in the wintertime. I remember going to the Christmas programs in the sleigh, and they'd heat the rocks and put in the sleigh so that, you know, it got warm.
Under the blanket.
And you always look for the Star of the East, you know, or the Bethlehem Star, where you want. And like I told Dean, it's out now. Most people don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah.
But I got up here, I don't know, about 12:30. It was about 4:30 in the morning, and I just happened to look out, and there it was, in the east, and it's just as bright. It's just beautiful. I was so tickled to see it again, because I remembered that so much. And my very favorite Christmas song is "Star of the East." I used to think that was a
great song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they always, well, I think I told you about Marina Crawford. See, she was teaching at school before I ever started, and she was beautiful. She had that black hair, but I remember her being at that Christmas program, and she was pregnant with Rebecca, but nobody knew it, you know. So she passed out. You know, they used to have those old corsets, and you'd pull them tight with these strings, you know, and I guess hers were too tight for her, and she fainted. But I've always remembered that because she was so beautiful, you know, and darn near scared us to death when she. But my grandmother, when you went to a dance, if there was a circle two-step or just a, you know, polka, she could wear out every man there.
Grandma would sit on the bench and she'd grab another one and go.
She'd just grab another one and go.
This was Grandma White?
Yeah.
Well, she was a good dancer, and she was heavy. Light on her feet, and she did love the polka, and she could just
keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
She was like the Duracell.
Yeah, right.
Ever ready.
But ever ready.
But everybody knew that. And in those days, it was nothing to have a dancing home. And you know what the size of that house up to Grandpa White's was, the old white one.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't awfully big. But us kids, we'd come down the stairs. You see, we were supposed to be upstairs in bed. And so we'd come down and we'd open that door about like that. And one of us would stay up on the steps, and one would get down low, you know, and about 3 or 4 of us kids could peek through there and watch them dancing. But they'd just dance most of the night away. And they'd have refreshments and, you know, not liquor, but like
right.
We'd have sandwiches and cookies and stuff like that. And Grandma always had coffee. And then you go down to Grandpa, or Grandma Woods' like, and Uncle Jack, that was her husband, my step-grandfather, but he was always called Uncle Jack, and he could play any instrument.
Any instrument?
Any instrument. I don't care what it was. Clarinet, played a lot of clarinet, but he played the piano, and at that time they had one of those pianos that they, player piano.
Oh,
yeah.
And we always went to Grandma White's on the 26th of December, but we went to Grandma Woods' on the 25th, right on Christmas Day, because Grandma White's birthday was the 26th, you see. And oh, what a good time we'd have. And we'd go down to, to Grandma Woods, and that music was nonstop. And Dolly and Jean both played. They both played the piano, play by ear. And they could sing, harmonize. They play the guitar. And it was just a hoot. Then when us Hoyts get together, we're all dumb when it comes to music. I think we're all tone deaf. Bill played the drums, but I mean, anybody played drums.
Dad plays them on his mouth. Well, what was your favorite Christmas, like most memorable Christmas? Do you remember?
Mm-hmm. When I got my Shirley Temple doll.
Well, let's hear about it.
Well, it was just, she was such a sweet little girl in all these movies, And that's one thing. Dad, we hardly ever would go out at night, like, except for just right around the, but he always saw that when there was a Shirley Temple movie, I never missed one. He took, we all went. And I wanted that doll so bad when it came out,
How old were you then?
I don't know, probably, I don't know if I'd have been 10 yet. But oh, I wanted that doll. So I got it. They gave me that for Christmas, and that was what I needed. Because I sure wasn't expecting it. And that was a heartbreak, I'll tell you. I had that doll, and we had what we called the coal house right there. And it got so that we weren't using all of it, and so Dan and I kind of had the first part of it, just as a place to, And I had her out there. We went down to Grandma Woods this one afternoon, and when we come home, the pigs had got in there, and that's what they took with my doll. And her head and her hair and that was all right, but they really chewed up the body so bad. So Mom took and she made her just a cloth body, but fixed her all up, and then fixed her so she sat in a cushion, like you do on the bed. And when I got married, I took it with me down to the States, and that was some of the stuff that wasn't unpacked yet was in that old garage when we had that fire. She burned up.
Oh.
So, that about broke my heart when.
That's too bad.
Well,
so you have a Christmas tree when you were growing up?
Didn't have a Christmas tree until I was probably 10.
And then would Grandpa go and cut it, or would you
No, it was no. I'll tell you, Carl's daddy was our neighbor, and his brother Morgan lived at Mountain View, and Dad had helped him get wood or something. And when he went to come home, Morgan said the first Christmas tree we ever had, and it wasn't awful high, maybe about like that, but that's the first time we ever had a Christmas tree.
And what did you put on it?
Oh, we had popcorn and, and your grandma, she was always pretty clever. She had lots of little things. We made those colored paper
chains.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff. And we had popcorn. But did you ever see a dream walking? Well, I did.
What about you, Dad?
Well, my first Christmas at the program at Whiskey Gap, my Grandma Berezay, I was 7, gave me a doll under the tree. And everybody was giving me the gears, but I wouldn't have cared what it was when it come from my Grandma Berezay, because I was her beanie, see. And it didn't, because I used to play with dolls with this Sheila Gilbert and other people, just because there was not really that many toys of any kind. But when we had the Christmas tree, and I can't remember, we pretty well always had a Christmas tree. It may not be too fancy, but anyway, we'd always decorate the house, the what we called the living room kitchen combination, and Mom would get this green and white crepe paper and red, and you'd cut it off, and then you'd hang it in the corners, and you'd twist it, and they had a bell in the center. And then when it would come to the Christmas tree, it was mostly just things cut out of paper, the different same kind of stuff. But the popcorn, you put a needle and thread and strung the popcorn, and that's what went all over But when we went to bed at night, we would always put a glass of milk and a piece of Christmas cake on the table for Santa Claus. And here is all the quart jars sitting of all the kids. And they didn't have names on them, but we knew who they was because the oldest one was here, and they went down. And in the morning when you woke up, there was peanuts, and there was candy, and there was
like a hardtack candy.
Hardtack candy, and like maybe a chocolate. And on top, when they filled it right up, there was either an orange or an apple. It was usually an orange sitting in the top. And so that was our sock. We never had socks. We had quart jars. And I guess really one of the best Christmases when I got my first pair of skates. And Melvin and Lloyd and myself was the ones that got the skates. And we had these little ones, you know, that's got the 2 tracks. But this was tube skates. And so after I got a little older, and I had them for quite a while, and they kept exchanging with people. And I used to build an igloo like that one that Kristen has a picture of with Misty. And I'd put a gunny sack over the hole and go in there and just put straw on the bottom and light a lantern. And I had these wooden kegs like that the nails came in, and I would pile them up on the ice, and I'd go skating along and jump over one, and then I'd jump over 2, and then I had them where they was 3. And this is when I was 14, 15 years old. And, but one time, Melvin and Lloyd and me got one present for Christmas. And that was one of these nice red wagons like this with the tires on it and everything. And it lasted exactly 2 weeks. Because Glenn had a horse with sharp shod with them corks in there, and you could just run as fast as you wanted on any kind of ice and just turn like that, you know. They call them sharp shod.
That would be in how they did their hook?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
their shoes.
yeah, they put the shoes on, and they got these corks that screw in, and so they were, and so anyway, he put a lariat on that about the second day we had it, and so I never rode in it. I rode in it when he didn't, and he'd lope down that ice
So innocent.
and turn. Hey, I was scared of that kind of stuff. And here's Melvin and Lloyd in there, and he'd turn, and that thing would just skid around on the ice, and of course it'd go out over them niggerheads, and it was 2 weeks, and the wheels was all bent and everything.
Ruined.
Tell them about your dad showing you how to sleigh.
Yeah, Dad, they built a sleigh, a homemade sleigh,
I got it
And,
in my little diary.
and so he took a tub and nailed it up. This is one of these tubs with the handles on.
Right.
And so behind the house there was
And he nailed it onto what?
he nailed it onto the sleigh, and it was quite steep, and so Jack and Glenn, they wouldn't go up very high. They'd just go up a little way. I'll show you, kids. So he took them up there to the top, and he says, this is how you do it. And he got in that tub and crossed his legs and took a hold of the handles, and down it went. And instead of staying on the brow of the hill, it cut off and hit that crusty snow, and I'm telling you, it was going. And all of a sudden, the sleigh went through the snow and ripped. The bottom stayed on the sleigh. It stopped. And here's Dad with the ring around the tub, up there 14 feet in the air, rolling over like down and hit in a snowbank. He never showed anybody more kids how to sleigh ride. But we used to have these sleighs that they'd take like the old rake wheels and that. They'd make a wooden deal, and then they'd bend them like this and go, and then up square at the back, and we'd come off that hill. Well, there was the dam there, but there was the neighbor's fence. And so we'd pull that fence up about this high and staple it in the wintertime, and we'd come sailing down there, and you'd have to duck your head down to go under that wire, and then you'd go down right onto the ice, and that's where you'd stop, and then you'd go back up again. You know?
What if you forgot?
If you forgot. But you see, we had to make our own entertainment. But like talking about dances and reading Dad's journals, there was a dance every month. Sometimes there was one pretty near every week in the wintertime at different places, see? And they would go to
And
these
a lot
dances.
of card parties.
Oh, yeah?
They'd get together and play cards.
And
What kind of cards would you play?
Whist, mostly.
one time at Whiskey Gap, and I imagine that I was probably 10, 12 years old, and while we were there for the Christmas concert, that's what we used to call them, it come up a blizzard. And so here we was, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face outside, so there was two Kimballs there, Chet and Claire. Well, Chet wasn't married, he was a bachelor, Claire was married and had some kids. And so, anyway, they used to drink a little at the dances, and so he was about half the shot, you know. And anyway, he disappeared. And so nobody knew, and about an hour and a half passed, and all of a sudden there was a knock on the outside of the door. And they went and opened the door, and here he is, just covered with snow. And he had a gunny sack with bread in it, loaves of bread, and he had a half of one of those cheeses that was about that thick, and they're about this big around. He had half of that under the other arm, and he rode with his horse right into that porch. Well, of course, they stopped him and took the stuff from him and made him, but you couldn't even see his eyes or anything. He was just, that horse and him was so covered with snow and ice, it was just like that they were completely white. And we sliced up that cheese, or they did, and sliced the bread and everything, and that's what we eat. And everybody waited till it was daylight. This was in the Christmas time, the short days, so it was pretty near 8 o'clock in the morning. They went up, hitched up their horses, and we all went home. The sun was shining beautiful. But you see, you took loose hay in the back of your sleigh, and when you got there, you unhooked your horses and tied them at the back and let them eat the hay while you were there, seeing. So, but no, it was my first play was I was a kid that was eating candy, and my mother was telling me not to. In the second act, I was sick, and there was a lady sitting next to my mother, and she said, "He's really sick. Aren't you worried?" No, she said, "That's just Dean. He's a pretty good actor." But so, anyway, it was, but I was just munching that candy down. It's kind of like gumdrops, and talking all the time.
You used to cook, didn't you, Dad, at home when you were a kid?
Yep.
Well, even growing up, I guess. What kind of stuff would you make?
Well, I always made, I'd come in, like, with the sheep in the summertime, and they'd come in because the flies would bother them, put their heads together for a couple hours, and I'd go in and make cookies or fudge or candy like that. And so that's what I used to do.
What about you, Mom?
Oh, I never did anything like that. The only thing I was expert at before I ever got married was chocolate cake. I did make good chocolate cake, peppermint frosting, and I made one for my dad every year for his birthday. That's about the only.
Yeah.
Because I mostly worked outside. I really didn't cook that much, and I really didn't like it. Cooking's not one of my favorite things. I do it because I have to.
What were your birthdays like when you had your birthday?
My mother always made a birthday cake. We never missed having a birthday cake, and it wasn't, anything. Well, she did decorate. She could decorate. She'd take an envelope and cut the corner out, and then put her, and do her writing and stuff like that, like I used to once in a while. But she always put money in our cake.
Like you used to do for us. So
That's
where the
that's where that
tradition
started. Yeah.
Money? Not dollars, just coins, though, right?
Like pennies and nickels and dimes. There was hardly ever a quarter ever got in a cake.
Do that?
I have done that for you.
But no, when we was, when I was 16 years old, I went a mile away from home and had a tent there, and I just come home, once a week. The sheep had a deal there, and I had to cook for myself. And during the war, when we had this ration and that, I had to use saccharin in those little white tablets in my cocoa and stuff like that, because I always drank cocoa. That's what. And I made fudge too and tried to use that other stuff too. But
So when you had a birthday?
when we had a birthday, say that July the 19th come up and it was on Wednesday, there was a cake on Saturday usually. Is when that she usually cooked the cakes and the cookies and the pies, see.
So,
It wasn't a special thing. You was recognized as it being your birthday, but there was no fuss. But then on Saturday, there was cake too.
And see, in our house, there was never a meal without a dessert. My dad loved dessert, and Mother, maybe you didn't have all you wanted, but you always had a piece. And during the war years when sugar was rationed, I was the only kid at school, Dan and I both, that always had dessert in our lunch. But my very favorite lunch, and I didn't say that, but when I was staying at Grandma Hoyt's, if I could con her into letting me make my own lunch, I'd make onion sandwiches. Well, the gal that I used to ride with her, sometimes Ron looks uncertain there. But Pat Gilbert lots of times would stop, and I'd ride to school with her instead of taking my own horse, because I usually didn't keep a horse when I was at Grandpa's, and I just walked. And she'd do anything. She'd give me whatever was the choicest thing in her lunch if I'd let her have one of my onion sandwiches.
Oh, two.
oh man. Were they green onions or just?
No, just plain old onions.
Yeah, just sliced onions.
Would
Yeah.
you put butter?
Oh yeah, so I just butter and just make it sandwiches. You know, it was just
Yowza.
But like, we did have dessert at meals, probably once a day, but it was either apricots, plums, peaches, or pears. That's the fruits that Mother used to can, see. And then, of course, she made choke cherry jelly, and she did have sarvice berries sometimes, or service berries, as they call them. But that was what we had, and you eat it with bread during the week. And like I say, on the weekend is when the dessert was, see.
But
So.
Mother would make a cake, and then you'd, like, you know, Dad might have two pieces, but us kids, we'd just have a piece of cake. We'd always...
So how much would a chocolate bar cost? When
They were a nickel.
A nickel?
A nickel.
And those black bat suckers that was, you know,
Cent apiece.
Yeah, they were a penny.
You could either get them in the caramel kind of, well, it was kind of chocolate, or the black, and they were in a cent apiece.
You used to go to the baseball games, and ice cream cones were a nickel. We made our own ice cream, you know, they're right there freezing it. And your chocolate bars were a nickel.
A nickel.
And the suckers were always just a penny apiece. The kids, of course, that's what we all loved. And we didn't have food as such there, did we? I don't remember anything.
No, mostly ice cream and stuff. But like when I was Kristen's age, we'd get a dime when we went to a ball game on the afternoon. And this was the thing about it. You worked all week doing your chores, and Saturday morning you was up early, and like if the garden needed weeding, if you didn't get her done, your 3 rows or 5 rows, whatever you had, then you stayed home. But if you got your work done, everybody got to go to the ball game. And you'd go there, and you'd buy an ice cream cone and your chocolate bar. That's what you could get for your dime. And then later on, when you get 15 or 16, well, then you got a quarter. And then when I started going with your mother, then I got $2 because it was 75 cents each to go to the dance. That's $1.50, and then your supper was two bits each. So for the $2, you could go to the dance, take a girl, and feed her supper for $2.
No one paid a tip now.
Yeah,
No.
that's right.
That's so interesting.
But out there to Delvanita, see, Foggins built that big hall that's still there. And so there was no basketball or anything like that. Baseball, now, that was the big thing. And we did have one teacher there when, I don't even remember what, but his name was Alec Detter. And he built a tennis court behind his teachers and taught us all how to play tennis, outdoor tennis. I'm a whiz at indoor tennis, but outdoor tennis I wasn't so great, but I learned how, and I really loved it. But that was, and then in the wintertime we'd go skating. That was one of our few things that we could do, and we just didn't have a sports program like they do now. But roller skating, after we got that big hall, then the outfit from Lethbridge would come out once every, I think it was Fridays, but I'm not sure, but they'd come out once a week, bring the roller skates, and all us kids could go out and roller skate. So I think we'd start from 2 to 3:30 would be our time, and then it was time to go home on the bus. But boy, we just thought that was great. But we always had dance there, and Foggins were the one who put the dances on, and they'd have a supper, you'd have fire supper, but it was good for the community.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Did you have a nickname, Mom?
They called him Tony.
Tony?
Mhm.
What the heck was that?
Well, I hated Enola so bad, and after we consolidated the schools, and see, there's Enola Rasmussen, there's Leola Sommerfeld, and Enola Hoyt. Now that's plain confusion for a poor teacher,
Why don't you just
you know.
So who chose Tony?
Howard Jones started calling me Tony, and I don't know, I don't know how much older he is than me, but he's quite a bit. He was a high school kid, and I'd said one time how I hated that name, and next thing I knew, he called me Tony, and so.
Did you have a nickname, Dad?
Not really.
Except for Grandma called you Deanie.
Deanie, yeah, and then later on, people sometimes, when I got, not when I first was in school, but they called me Dab sometimes. But it was nothing, not till these guys, my sons and these other sons that aren't our sons, started calling me Rocco. Until that time, and I still, last week, 2 times in town, 2 different kids, Tom Trawick and who was the other one, called me Rocco. Well, Rocco, how are you doing today?
And he loves it. And
Yeah.
I do too.
But they had a couple
It's a
words
cute
behind
name.
it, too.
When did you start dating?
When did I start dating? Probably when I was, I don't know.
What was your first date, Mom?
I don't know.
You don't remember your first date?
Wasn't that important, I guess. No.
What about your first kiss?
My first date was with,
She was something pretty quick there.
no, I'll tell you, there wasn't no kiss. I just thought of this, but I used to go with George Foggin to the dances, you know.
Right.
And so we were all to the dance, and Bob Mansky asked to take me home. So I went to George and asked him. I said, "What? You know, I had to get permission."
Right.
So I went and asked him if he thought it'd be all right if I went home with Bob, and he said, "Yeah," but he said, "You be damn careful." When I went home with Bob, I didn't have to worry at all. Beth and George drove right behind us. Bob walked me to the door. Old George sat there with the lights right on us. He couldn't, you know. And then when Carol came along, he did the same thing for Carol.
So who gave you your first kiss?
I don't know.
You don't remember your first kiss?
Probably Bob, because I went with him, you know, off and on for quite a long time. But I don't even remember.
Can you take him, Dad? Can you beat Bob up?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And see, I had known who she was all the time, see, when she was and one time, when we were still in Whiskey Gap, Hubert West had a ball team. This was softball. I caught, Melvin pitched. And then we had girls. We didn't have enough boys, so we had girls and boys on the team. And that was, I think, 2 years before we consolidated, when I was in the 4th or 5th grade. Anyway, we played Jefferson, we played Taylorville, we played Kimball and Pershing, and we played Briner. And we never, ever got beat, because he'd always tell you, if you did what Hubert West said, you'd always win. But anyway, we got out there to Reinard, and I don't know whether it was after the ball game or before, but anyway, here is Enola Hoyt and Iris Wiggle.
How old were you at this time?
Well,
I was through school there, third grade, I quit.
Yeah.
So that was
Anyway,
9, you'd have been.
old Iris grabbed my cap, and so when I'd run after her, she'd throw it to Enola. And they just kept doing this, and when I chased them in the schoolhouse, and I don't know how I finally got it back, but anyway, they finally give me my, I was about to cry, I think is what it was, so they give me my cat back. And
Way
so,
to go, Tony.
so then anyway,
Well, I wouldn't call Tony in those days.
when
Until I got
then we
back.
started having these parties. I was invited to a party at Otto Sommerfeld's. I was 16 years old, and or 17. She was 16 at the time, and so they had a game called Cross Questions and Crooked Answers. And so they just went along, and they had a hat, and they picked one hat you picked out for the answers, and one was for the questions. And so it so happened that she was standing when they lined us up right across from me. And so she was the one that asked me the question, and I gave the answer. And if either one of you laughed, you had to kiss the girl. This was the game.
No, you asked the question, I gave you the cure.
Okay.
Sickness, illness, and cure.
Okay. And my question was, I hurt behind.
I told him to take Epsom salts.
That's what the answer was. Come on. So, of course, she giggled and so did I, and I kissed her.
Yeah,
And,
that
So
was,
that was your first kiss.
yeah.
from him, yeah. And it upset him so bad he waited 2 years before he come and got another one.
No, she was going with Dale Lowry, see. And we had always been taught at home that you don't hedge in. You know, they didn't lecture us on this, but if somebody was going with somebody, you wasn't, you know, you kept your distance, so.
But old Dale, Dad didn't like Dale very well. And he teased him so bad, and they played ball against each other. Dad was a pitcher. But by the time Dale was playing ball, Dad had quit pitching pretty much and was just playing second base. Well, I don't think Dale, after he started going with me, ever made it past second base, unless he had knocked a homer or something. Dad gave that kid such a bad time that
He was scared to death.
He was scared to death of Dad. You know, of course I just blamed Dale because Daddy was kind of a pain in the butt to my boyfriend.
You were a good-looking lad, though, were you, Dad? You had your own teeth back then.
Not that he was so good looking, he was so funny.
He was scary after
Because he come that night, Dan and I were still up. Mom and Dad had gone to bed, and it wasn't that late.
What night was this?
On a Saturday night he come.
Well, what happened was, see, my parents did not like Enola. And I think it was mostly from my mother. Because every time that we would go to the Hoyts, Grandpa Hoyt would tune my dad up, give him drinks and that.
Uh-huh.
And so she just, you know, had that thing, well, it's a Hoyt, you know. And, but when Dale one night at Jefferson showed, he had a book there of kind of some pretty
Risque.
risque.
I don't even remember what it was.
Well, I could tell you exactly what it was. But anyway, she slapped his face.
Way to go, Tony.
And then she went home with Chris Foggin from that dance. Well, then after that, after this slap, then in the old computer, I thought, this girl is loose now.
Oh, I laughed.
And so then at a ball game, I gave her my signet ring in Taylorville. Yep.
But did you say anything? Like, did you just...
Well,
Sure, we was maybe holding hands a little and stuff, you know, and I was,
I didn't think you'd give me your signet ring before we went to Waterton.
no, I gave you the signet ring because one night I asked my dad if I could take the truck. Well, where are you going, Mom said. Well, I said, I'm going down to Hoyt's. She said, well, are you going to get your ring back? And I said, yeah. I said, that's what I'm going for. And so they let me take the truck, and I goes down there. And so I pulls up in front and parks and goes in, and here's her and Dan looking at the catalog. Well, the Simpson catalog, or the Eaton's, I don't know which one it was. And her parents are in bed in here, see. So as they're turning the pages, here I am just acting normal, you know. And I mean, this stuff just comes out, you know. And they were laughing, her and Dad. And unknown to me, well, in the bedroom, they were laughing too.
Dad finally says, Mom, I feel like a damn fool and you're laughing. What? We better get up. So they got up, which was unheard of.
This was at 11:30.
So
She
Mother
iced a cake.
iced a cake, made coffee and a drink for us. And the next day we'd be going around or working it. All of a sudden Dad would laugh and he'd say, hell, that Bertie kid's crazy. So I thought, I better take another look at him. Because usually if there was a boy there who would come to visit, well, he did have a few specials, like Tom Breen and Tom Livingston. And he would just glower, just sit here glowering like this all the time. You know, he wouldn't even look at the guy, just kind of glower.
Her favorite boyfriend was Jay Bronca.
Oh, Dean.
He came there to see her one night, and he made you go with her, didn't he?
Yeah. Come and woke me up. And
Because Ern Bronca run the Whiskey Gap Trading Company, and he was Dad's real friend.
oh,
So Grandpa made you get up and go
oh
on
yeah,
a date.
well, he all excited because Jay come to. I was in bed, all excited because Jay Bronco came. Oh, come on, yeah, you know. So I got up and went with him, but I had Chris Foggan bring me home.
Lucky for the Foggins, Mother.
Yes, I was very lucky.
So, you started dating, you gave Mom your signet ring.
Before that, and I didn't bring it home that night.
Of course not.
So the first date we had was on the 1st of July, 1947 at Waterton. And so we went up there, and after a few, I was there with George Ney and Chesley Pearson and Dale and some of the other Lowry kids. And so we went over to the skating rink, and she's there roller skating where the theater is.
In Waterton.
In Waterton. So when she come and sit down over there, so we just kind of talking, and Dale, he was kind of, you know, off a little ways, and these other guys, and so
Glowering.
Huh?
Glowering.
Yeah, glowering. I said, well, how about going to the dance with me tonight? Sure. And so, anyway, we went to the dance, and so all of a sudden we danced a few times, and I see Dale come and danced with her, and they went outside. And so I thought, well, I guess that's the end of that. And I'll tell her what he did. He wanted you to dump me.
I go, okay. And I didn't.
She said, no thanks, and they came back in. And so we went on, and so I was to ride home with Dale. And it made him mad, so he left me. So when the dance was over, here it is, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I got no ride, so I just walked up to Uncle Vern and Aunt Martha's and knocked on the door, and she come out, Aunt Martha. And I said, well, oh, she says, it's you, Dean. I said, yeah. I said, my ride left me. So I said, I was just wondering if I could spend the night here. Oh, sure, come on in. So they got me some blankets, and I slept on a little couch there. So then the next morning, after breakfast and everything, he worked for the park, and so this was, I walked over. She was staying with Bill and Joyce in the motel. And I went over there, and so I was kind of hanging back, and she was kind of, you know, didn't know where I'd went that night before. So I said, well, my ride left me. And so I said, I'm hunting for a ride. And so Bill said, well, he said, we got plenty of room if you want to ride home with us. So we rode home, and when we got down there, he took me over to Campbell's, where my horse was, or to Nate Lowry's, where Dale lived, got my horse, and they went on home, and I went over to Bill Campbell's and picked up a counter horse and led it home that Dad had bought. And so that was the beginning of, so then after that we went to dances. I went to, on the 23rd of September is when we got the 3 foot of snow, and I had a date with her. And my dad had let me have the pickup. It was for a Saturday. And so, anyway, I heard, you know, it was early in the morning, I heard the truck start up, and I never thought anything about it. So, when I come downstairs, my mother said, well, or she hollered upstairs, she said, well, you better get up and do the chores. She said, and if you're going to Waterton, you're going to have to catch a ride, because Dad and Glenn went to get some canner horses, and so you ain't using the truck. Oh boy, did that boil me. So anyway, I got up and so I did all my chores Saturday. I got up Sunday morning, did all my chores, packed my